Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Fading Fantasy, the remainder of the Final Fantasy series Retrospective Review. Man, where does one start with this revered franchise of games, other than to say this? There are a lot of Final Fantasy branded titles, sequels, tie-in games, remakes, remasters, MMOs, and related series, all of which have been keeping Square Enix afloat for decades. I haven't played them all, not by a long shot. I don't personally know anyone who has, but I'm sure there are some superfan out there who may have spent their life in the worlds of Final Fantasy. And oh boy, has that quality been all over the goddamn place. For some of the greatest and well-loved titles of the mainline series, which, at time of this recording, is 16 games deep, to frankly abysmal mobile titles, and all of them, in some way or another, are the result of the persistence of one man, Hironobu Sakaguchi. Sakaguchi worked for Square from 1983 to 2003. In those early days, he was a part-time hire for a company that was a software subdivision of the Den Yu Sha electric power conglomerate, I sense perhaps a clue to the creation of the villains of one of the most series popular titles here, and eventually moved to full-time status. Sakaguchi and others developed a number of titles for Japanese PCs in the mid-1980s, to some success. But it was after their partnership with Nintendo that they needed to develop titles for the Famicom system, and that they began to have financial trouble. The heads at Square, facing financial ruin, asked their best team members to come up with pitches for a game, quite possibly their last one. It was here that Sakaguchi took his shot, reasoning that RPGs might be a viable market after the recent blockbuster success of Enix's Dragon Quest game, known as Dragon Warrior in the States. He put forth a pitch for a fantasy role-playing game in a similar vein, except with a four-party team. The pitch was accepted and was named Final Fantasy, the joke being that it was about to be the final game Square would ever make if they failed. But it didn't. Quite the opposite, in fact. It sold 400,000 copies in Japan and 700,000 copies in the United States, so very much a commercial success. That success would prompt the development of a follow-up very quickly, and the game series would become Square's flagship game soon after that. Even into the decades after the acquisition of rival Enix to become Square Enix, if you've been around enough like me to remember playing games by these two companies when they were still independent of one another, then make sure to take your heart medication, old-timer. Final Fantasy has remained a top-selling title among role-playing games, action games, and for pretty much anyone who likes overly pretty characters wearing too many goddamn belts and carrying impractical weapons. I would even venture to say that perhaps outside of the Persona games, or perhaps Dragon Quest, the Tales games, or maybe Breath of Fire, Final Fantasy is really the first and only name most Western games and gamers ever know of Japanese role-playing games at all, despite there being a long and rich history of the genre in Japan. I have covered many of the games in the mainline series over the years of the show. So many of them have enthralled me with their stories, their characters, their gameplay innovations, or lack thereof, in sticking to tradition, that they have become part of the fabric of my life. But as I said in my review of Final Fantasy IV, had it not been a copy of Nintendo Power and a chance trip to Canada, I might have missed out on this series entirely. Don't worry, I explained it further in that episode. But I've also played a number of games that I did not feel were qualified for getting their own 10 to 20 minute breakdown of that game. While all of these games have been fantastical, not every one has been fantastic. Let's get started. If I were going strictly by chronology, then 1993's Final Fantasy Mystic Quest would be next on my playlist. Thirsty for more after completing Final Fantasy IV, but by then my NES was a thing of the past, so I could not go back and play the NES games, Mystic Quest was the best I could do. This is the only one on this list I never owned. but I rented a few times from Blockbuster Video. In it, you play, well, it really doesn't matter who you play, as you can change the name of the main character, but for the sake of all the Mystic Quest fans out there, his name is Benjamin, and he is on a quest to save the world by recovering 4 crystals that correspond to the 4 elements. Ben is not alone in his quest, but just barely. He is frequently joined by one another non-player characters that teach him a skill or gives him some weapon or item to traverse the world's many challenges, which is a pretty neat idea. The game also dispenses with random battles for more controlled encounters. The player can choose to fight or not, and most every ability you gain comes through exploration. The game was developed specifically for the US market and was dumbed down a lot for what the developers felt was a market who had little to no interest in role playing games, which is a fair assessment. Not many Western game developers are making RPGs not specifically tied to the PC market, so they were trying to broaden their appeal. There was nothing really wrong with Mystic Quest. It was certainly one of the games released in 1993. But coming off of Final Fantasy IV, I personally felt somewhat shafted by this wet blanket of a title. Having navigated the previous numbered titles, this thing was a pile of shit by comparison. But I suppose, had you never played a Final Fantasy game before this SNES title, it would have been an introduction to the series. Maybe not a good introduction, but an introduction nonetheless. If you enjoyed it, awesome! I didn't, and after 2 separate attempts to try and like it, it went back to the video store as fast as I could get it there. This isn't my type of Final Fantasy. 1992's Final Fantasy V would be next in order, mainly because I played it in 1998 on the PlayStation. I played this well after Final Fantasy VI, another title that should be on every RPG's fans' playlist if it wasn't already, and hoping I would get a cross between the 2 games that bookended it. You play as Bartz. There's a fucking name. A wanderer investigating a fallen meteor only to discover a bunch of villains in the employ of an entity known as X-Death are collecting 4 elemental crystals that control the world, and are trying to corrupt the crystals to unseal the prison where X-Death can be found. Bartz goes to stop this corruption and collects several fellow warriors. Lena, Galuf, Creeley, and later Faris to help him stop this. The gimmick of this game is the job system, in which the player can swap all 4 characters into 22 separate classes: Knight, Black Mage, White Mage, Samurai, Ninja, Blue Mage, Thief, and others, in which upon mastering the class, the character unlocks some sort of permanent feature that they can easily change out and customize. The player can use these features to defeat X-Death's employees with, supposedly, whatever way or however they choose. Again, I don't feel like vomiting a Wikipedia page at you. This is another game I never finished. I got about halfway through, and I just kept losing battle after battle, and hit some boss, I don't recall who or what stage of the game, that I just couldn't get past. I looked up a guide online, in the early GeoCities and Angelfire state of the internet in those days, to try and figure out what I was doing wrong. The answer I found was to unlock a job skill for a class I did not have because I hadn't unlocked it by leveling up across all 4 characters. So grinding for levels. Lots and lots of grinding. The answer to the solution was grinding. Well, fuck that. I hate grinding for levels in RPGs. And Final Fantasy V was still stuck in the grinding years of role-playing video games, where the point was to spend hours of your life fighting the same battle against the same monster sprites until the numbers go up more than enough to overcome the hard numbers of the regional boss monster that is locking progress. I wasn't dealing with that anymore, so I stopped playing. I eventually sold the game to buy something more fun, at least for the sad amount of money GameStop would give me for Final Fantasy V. And that is where my time with this game will remain. And speaking of 1998, let's look at Final Fantasy Tactics. This sub-series within the Final Fantasy universe takes place on the world of Ivalice, which would later come back around in Final Fantasy XII and the game Vagrant Story, which I will talk about later, and would revolve around the events of the Lion War, a contentious, protracted political war in the wake of settling the 50 Years' War, where a recovering Ivalice suffers the death of its ruler, and two opposing candidates, our lions in this Lion War, are the potential contenders for an empty throne. Our lead actor in this mess is Ramza, a mercenary who is against both sides of the Lion War, and in return is hunted by them. When he discovers the Church of Ivalice instigated the war in an effort to collect something called the Zodiac Stones, so they could control Ivalice and unleash the power of Ultima, things go from bad to worse quickly. Final Fantasy Tactics is exactly what it says on the box, a tactical role-playing game where your terrain management and troop positions are just as important as how many white mages, dragoons, and summoners you have on the field to control the advance and onslaught of the enemy. This is very similar to the Tactics Ogre series, which would make sense as the man who created that series came to work for Square at this time. Or if you like, it is similar to the more well-known in the West game XCOM. This is another game that eventually fell by the wayside for me. While the art style is cute and it was fun for what it was, I'm not a tactics guy. I don't possess the kind of brain that finds this sort of thing, giving out pseudo-military stratagems in a given situation, fun. This is somewhat strange for me to say, considering how many tabletop role-playing games I've played over the years, all of which have some sort of roots in tactical wargaming. But I never really enjoyed sitting around in a small room with a bunch of dudes with poor hygiene and worse attitudes, with their rulers and protractors trying to figure out if the pewter figurines on the table they stole out of a miniature railroad enthusiast basement are a millimeter closer to the goal than the other guy's figurine, and that gives them some sort of imagined advantage while they try and relitigate the Battle of Gettysburg on the small scale. And sadly, I got that feeling from Final Fantasy Tactics as well at times, despite the familiar trappings. But I am glad I tried it at least. Nothing is wrong with this game. It's just not a right fit for me. What I am sorry I ever tried to play was 1999's Final Fantasy VIII. Holy fuck, what a piece of shit game. The best thing this game ever had was its two-player mode, most famously showcased in the Charlie's Angels remake. Now, all joking and outright hostility aside, I was pumped for this game. Coming hot on the heels of Final Fantasy VII and my love affair with that title, it looked like more of the same, just with a different cast and another dude with a big sword. Squall was his name in this case. Except his big sword was also a gun. A gun! A sword gun! It's fucking stupid, but considering early real-world gunsmiths combined hammers and axes with muskets for when you ran out of powder and shot, it's not totally unplausible. Squall, however, was another moody, barely speaking protagonist whose most famous quotes in the game could be summed up in the three dots that form an ellipsis. The problem is that by 1999, I was past that sort of shitty, moody teenage phase for our 17-year-old protagonist, the product of a military academy in a world where the cities are giant biodomes powered by magic. In this world, the kids are highly trained soldiers, fighting each other's nation's wars of conquest and invasion. And the antagonist of this title, looking to be Queen of Shit Mountain, is a sorceress named Edea, who is being used and controlled by a future timeline sorceress named Ultima Sia. Yes, there are other party members involved in this game, but mostly a Squall's cannon fodder, and a rival who Edea controls. But the story of this game mostly revolves around Loner Squall being flustered and embarrassed about pretty girl teammate Renoa and not being able to accept his romantic feelings for her. And it's so bad! I'm not a romance novel reader, but I cannot believe that so many published romance authors could have ever been embarrassed enough to publish anything like this awkward, stilted, pissy plot of this game. Everything else is secondary to Squall being a dick and fussing in his leather pants over Renoa. I didn't like most of the main characters, although I thought Kestis was kind of cute and the only party member that wasn't a complete dud. But somehow, and maybe it's my tiny brain not understanding the sublime glory of this fuckstick of a game here working against me, I just couldn't figure out how the magic system in this game worked, with trying to summon and shit to characters to cast spells, and I was trying to get my thing to work, and I was getting my ass handed to me left and right. I tried to get through this game. I had the strategy guide and everything. Couldn't do it. To say I was disappointed in this title in the wake of Final Fantasy VII is an understatement. But it sold millions and set sales records, and game outlets heaped praise upon it, as they are wont to do. I guess, folks. I guess. Still, it is at least somewhat better than the next entry on this list. Because the hits, just kept coming to me around this time in gaming. Let's move on to 2001's Final Fantasy X. As I have said before, I played this back to back with Silent Hill 2. And after completing both titles, my first thought was, if this is the best modern gaming can offer and the direction of the industry is going, then I am out, motherfuckers. I hate this title so much. Not as much as I hate the OG Silent Hill 2, but it's damn close. I won't belabor the point because I know there are lots of fans in this title out there, and I know a number of them are in the podcasting community I have found myself in, and a few have quietly tried to rebut me. Unsuccessfully, I might add. But fucking really! Another asshole teenager and a stupid as fuck princess fantasy running around with his I want to kill my dad attitude when the dad in question turns into, I don't know, some sort of hybrid of the shark from Jaws and Satan himself, and everyone lives on islands, and their only form of escapism is underwater volleyball. What the fuck was this game even supposed to be? Other than the board of directors at Square Enix scratching their ass cheeks during a meeting trying to figure out what to do with a flagging franchise. At least in Final Fantasy XVI, they blatantly ripped off Game of Thrones. This was supposed to be what exactly, fans? Hell comes to Fantasy Island? Gidget meets the Seven Samurai? Daddy doesn't love me Hawaiian style? Look out, Moondoggy, better not get hit in the blitz balls. This game is so fucking mindless. The cast is shit, and spoiler, at least two of them, it turns out, are ghosts and have really been dead the whole time. And Christ, by the end of the roster, there's a big blue cat and an annoying tank girl in the party, with barely a Victoria's Secret's thongs worth of thread tethering them to the plot. The big titty goth chick has an outfit made entirely of belts, and to be honest, the fact that this entirety of the Polynesian culture hasn't banded together to sue the utter fuck out of Square Enix over the character of Waka is still a mystery to me as to why not. The plot is about sacrificing the character of Yuna to stop the advance of sin, not the seven deadly kind, but of the shark devil variety. And the main character, Titus, or Titus, saying no to that, and hilarity ensues. Especially the infamous and cringe-worthy laughing scene, where our computer-generated sprites learn what it means to be human. Fucking hell. The minigames are awful, the side quests are fetch quests for gear and a sense of failed accomplishment, and yeah, I really do not like this game. Now, I will say as positives, I like the evolved sphere grid experience system, where the characters felt more customizable. And I love the fact that the whole party was on the battlefield, even if you could only command 3 of them at a time, and that you could hot swap characters in and out on the fly. Square Enix should have kept that in other titles. Cough, cough, Final Fantasy Rebirth, cough, cough. But I think I've kicked this one while its pants were down enough. And if you're listening out there, and you were the ones who tried to counter my points, no shade and no insult is met, and much love to you. I know you did it because you love this title, and were hoping I'd see a bright spot that isn't there. Hey, we've all been apologists for something. We're still wrong, but we've all been apologists for something. Moving on. Next on our tour de force is 2006's Final Fantasy XII and the return to the world of Ivalice after some time away. I didn't dislike this title, I just didn't know what to do with it. It certainly looked like a Final Fantasy game, and it had many of the series' hallmarks by then. Evolving artwork with the power of the PS2 to more closely bring the art of Yoshitaka Amano to life, young and annoying protagonist, underground resistance to the current head's state, strangely attractive bunny girl that might as well have had the words weird freaky sex tattooed on her forehead. It was all there. You play as Vaughn, a young sky pirate wannabe, recruited by a princess to stop her country's subjugation by an occupying force. A by now common theme of military occupation as part of the greater plot in many of the later series games. And the world itself is awash in magic and airships. Kind of some mage punk theme. The airships will feature quite a bit into the plot along with the organized underground resistance force of which you are now a part. And you'll recruit quite a few people to your cause, most of whom I don't remember other than the aforementioned bunny girl and some handsome dude in a fancy vest and a posh accent. I'm not even sure what the whole point of this game was, as this was another title I never completed or got terribly far into. But I will say it brought to the table several features not seen before in this type of single-player game. An open world, as Final Fantasy XI had been an MMO, a system where you could program the party members individually and their individual AI to carry out your wishes in combat, a battle system that blended combat and non-combat scenarios seamlessly, the license system atop the experience system where you could teach your characters new skills and equipment sets to make them whatever you want in addition to rewarding them by leveling them up, and a few other bits and bobs brought over from the MMO crowd. But I never let and never felt Final Fantasy XII was really an MMO light or anything. But I struggled for years to explain what I thought this game was, and maybe why I let it go long before even the midpoint of the title. It wasn't until recently, and as a Final Fantasy game, that at least we knew it, that I couldn't really put my hand as to what this franchise was or what this was becoming as part of the franchise. Except until recently, when I played another game by another company, Capcom in this case, that I realized what Final Fantasy XII was. This game is Final Fantasy Monster Hunter. Let me explain. A lot of the side quests you need for loot and gear require you to go out and hunt down ever larger and more dangerous beasts, divorced from the military conquest plot. That's not really how MMOs like World of Warcraft work, but it is damn sure how Capcom's Monster Hunter series works, as I have experienced it at least. And I think that is what they were trying to do here. Make their own version of the beloved Capcom franchise, but in the Final Fantasy engine with extra unnecessary bullshit. And it was okay. I have no hate for it. But again, this just wasn't for me. Hell, by this point, Kingdom Hearts was more Final Fantasy than Final Fantasy XII was. Again, if you have fond memories of this title, I'm not here to disabuse you of them. Cherish those memories. Just know that I don't share them. Let's head on to another oddball side story title in the Square catalog. 2006's Final Fantasy VII, Dirge of Cerberus. Holy shit, folks. This is not in any way an RPG. This game is a first and third person action shooter, a style of game Square Enix is in no way knowledgeable of or is comfortable with. Kind of like how they tried to do a 3D beat 'em up and gave the world a bouncer. So focused were they on having their cake and eating yours too. By this point, Square was trying to find any milk at all left in the poor husk of the cow that was Final Fantasy VII. And this wasn't the only title they threw at the gaming public in a blind panic nearly a decade after that game, in its form, it was based around. This game takes place a few years after the events of Final Fantasy VII, specifically the CGI movie Advent Children, and starts and stars the fan favorite bad boy of the team, Vincent Valentine. Vincent finds himself a member of the World Regenesis Organization. Seriously, what the fuck? An organization dedicated to helping fix all the damage Sephiroth and his meteor spell did in the main game. He is attacked by some kind of group called Deep Ground, which was a triple super secret organization within the Shinra Corporation, dedicated to making super soldiers out of those who had already been primed by Mako energy from the soldier program, and were somehow given the genes of the ancients of the old world to make them weird and special and aloof and gothy. And what the holy shit am I even saying? This is about as much sense as the plot makes. But Vincent hates these guys as Hojo is responsible for making them, and him, and somehow the lost love of his life, Lucretia, is somehow involved. A fun fact. The cut scene where Vincent meets the ghost of this woman in Final Fantasy VII was bullshit content Square added because they weren't sure what to do with Vincent or if players would even find him. And the developers had to rely on fan art of Lucretia to even build her for this spin off game. Video game developers and really, games are neat, huh? Amazing. Look, I'm not rehashing the plot of Final Fantasy VII here and now. I already did an episode on it, and if you haven't played it or the remakes or other associated titles, then I'm just throwing names at you. Just deal with it, okay? This shit is already long past the stage of TLDR. The leader of this deep ground mess is Weiss, and he has set his sights on killing Vincent and carrying on Sephiroth's work. Spoilers, he fails to do so when Vincent shoots repeatedly. And yet somehow, they still added this weird side content to the Integrate DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake. I played this game a lot, like an embarrassing amount. I think mostly because I liked Vincent. I thought he was cool, and it was more new Final Fantasy VII. But this is a bad game for a lot of reasons. Plot, unfamiliar mechanics, Square Enix not know what the fuck they were doing, and a decade of convoluted fanboy and fangirl horseshit. I cannot really recommend this title. But then again, I played the shit out of the bouncer too, so take that as you will. And lastly, I do have to add an appendix to the Final Fantasy tales. So deep in the sauce was I that I actually went to the theater to see 2001's Final Fantasy The Spirits Within movie. Maybe because the girl I was dating at the time wanted to see them too, I don't really remember. It was not something that was memorable. It was so far into the uncanny valley that even Indiana Jones couldn't find it, and it was something to do with space, I think? But I sat through it. It wasn't good, and I seriously considered asking for my money back about halfway through. But it was a video game movie to a popular series on screen in a small town that only got the most top of the top popular and common movies, so how often did something like this happen? So I sat down and shut up about it. And now a legion of YouTube movie review smartasses have made money off shitting on this film. Good, I guess. And we also have to talk briefly about, as I promised, 2000's Vagrant Story, which I owned a copy of and played for a bit before realizing I was in the same position as I was in with Final Fantasy Tactics, but with only one character to control. I actually didn't know for many years that this was a related title to the Final Fantasy series, or that the world of Ivalice in this game was the same one from Tactics in Final Fantasy XII. Hell, they even reference this game in Final Fantasy XII, and I missed it. Our hero here is Ashley Riot, a risk breaker, or a one-man army sent to infiltrate another country's possible military coup, where he gets blamed for a murder he didn't commit, and Ashley must go underground to solve it. Now, I know this isn't directly related to Final Fantasy games, but more of an extended universe game, but it had a few innovations, such as no shop, so all weapons and gear had to be created, salvaged, or modified, puzzle solving, tactical combat movement, and general strategy above most standard RPGs. I sadly didn't get too far into this title either, Kind of a theme here. Mostly because of the same problem I had with tactics. I was getting my ass beat so routinely and thoroughly that I stopped having fun. Some have said this is one of the greatest video games ever made. And who can say? I certainly cannot argue that logic because I think I only got a few hours in before I quit, although that does seem like a hyperbolic argument given all that has come out in the last 24 years. But at the same time, this is one of those games where I am reminded that one does not need to be good at games at all to enjoy them. And I certainly was not good at this game. I can't win them all. But I certainly did think it was a pretty game. Too bad, I guess. Now that I've said my piece on the rest of the games in this wildly and bloated extended game universe that I played, where, oh where, does this put me with the Final Fantasy franchise at this point in my gaming history? Well, Square Enix has been going for a long time. It's become a godfather of the game industry, and they've really narrowed themselves down to what they know best: Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. They must, for we got an ungodly amount of both games. I think Square Enix has simmered down their formula to focusing on ARPGs and regular old RPGs. It's keeping them alive in an evolving and somewhat uncertain industry, which I believe is all they really need to do at this point. I believe we will continue to get quality Final Fantasy games for years to come. I may not always be interested in what their output is, but I will certainly keep an eye out for anything that looks like it might be interesting. Despite other companies in this industry and their turmoil, I don't really have much to say about this company or what they make. They are perfectly fine, and I don't have any complaints about what they are doing or making, which is kind of odd to say about a company that has been in business for 40 plus years. They are continuing to make perfectly fine games with minor innovations despite multiple new hands on the projects throughout the years, and no one has ever bat an eye about this. Almost like they are following a formula. Maybe they just have really good upper management. Maybe it's a business culture thing. Maybe because they deal a lot with Sony, Sony has demands of a certain level of quality from its partners. I don't really know because I'm not really in tune with the business side of things. You would have to ask someone who is an insider there. Yet it is somewhat remarkable. Or maybe this would be more normal if other companies managed their businesses this way. But yes, I could see myself being fairly happy with Square Enix and their products for years to come, provided they make something I'm looking forward to, which is not really often these days. But when they do, I'm as excited for it as any other fan. And there is a lot of every type of fan across the history of the series, and with the remakes, remasters, and the ability to emulate so much of the catalog of this company, anyone wanting to know more about the Final Fantasy universe can have lots of things to explore. But as I have said, not everything is for every player like it was for me. That's okay. Variety is the spice of life, after all, and sometimes that spice is used rather heavily. I know it is usual for me to have some kind of big stinger or gripe this far in, but I truly don't. The Final Fantasy series has had a huge impact on me, and although a lot has changed, and I don't always agree with the changes that they have been instituting, that hardly dims or tarnishes the previous achievements of the series or the people who worked on them. Even if I don't agree, the work remains quality. And I don't believe I'm alone in thinking that. Sure, we all have our favorite games from the studio, and even the mainline games it produced. Many of them the same, many will be different. We all, as players, have likely not played all of them or have missed a few along the way. Time does that. And as you get older, as a player, and responsibilities mount, we don't have all the time we would like to explore these worlds of Final Fantasy. But the beautiful thing is that when we do have time, those many, many worlds are waiting for us to come by and see what they have going on. maybe even help the protagonist save the world yet again. And really, isn't that the best thing we can do as heroes of the worlds of Final Fantasy? Risk it all for the friends we made along the way, kill God or a false god, and save everything in the most cinematic way possible. Yeah, I think so too. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Orton Wells, and Mass Llama for being patrons of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out the Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.